If it feels like 5 years since the Seahawks and 49ers last played, well, it hasn't been that long, but we understand your feelings. Both teams look a lot different this time of year, particularly the home team 49ers heading into Sunday's rematch. We're going to be breaking down all the changes the Seahawks are going to have to gear up for heading into the NFC West title game here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Tuesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it, whether you're listening in from Bothell, Washington, or Portland, Texas. Thanks for making Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network. And to all of you who tuned in an hour ago, you can thank my computer for not adjusting time zones after I came back from Charlotte. So this was when the show was supposed to start. Technology sometimes gets in the way. So we apologize for that, but glad to have you tuning in now for the show. We're going to be taking a look at what's new with the 49ers. Week one, these teams met, Seahawks and 49ers, meeting at the end of the season. A lot of changes going into this NFC West and number one seed title game coming up at Levis Stadium. We've got Tell the Truth Tuesday, words of wisdom coming out of Charlotte and into this crucial finale. And is JSN going to win Offensive Player of the Year? We'll be looking at a number of postseason awards that the Seahawks may have contenders in. All that coming courtesy of our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDINNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. There's been kind of a running joke going the last couple days that it feels like 5 or 6 years since the last time the Seahawks and the 49ers played. And in all reality, that would take you back to the infamous Jacob Hollister game where he was stuffed about a card deck away from the goal line in a very similar game that had NFC West title and number one seed at stake. Pretty much the same situation, except this time is going to be in Santa Clara at Levi's Stadium. And these teams did play earlier this year, but it was in the season opener, and now they get to play to close out the season with the highest stakes possible. And keeping that in mind, normally with these divisional games, Rob, we don't do a what's new segment for both games because not much changes for the opponent. But in the case of the 49ers, with an entire season now in the rearview mirror, you can't say that at all about Kyle Shanahan's team with all the injuries and the roster turnover and star players that were injured that ended up being disgruntled and leaving the team. You name it, the 49ers have had a little bit of everything. And yet here they are at 12-4 with a chance to beat the Seahawks and be the number one seed. It's Kyle Shanahan's greatest coaching job.
No, I 100% agree with you there. I think that, when it gets down to voting for Coach of the Year, then Kyle Shanahan has my vote. I just think that he has done a remarkable job of keeping this team together despite you kind of referenced the Brandon Ayuk situation. Obviously, all of the injuries that have befallen the 49ers here. I mean, you just go back to the opening game of the season. Of course, the Seahawks lost at Lumen Field to the San Francisco 49ers, and a huge part of that was because of the forced fumble that Nick Bosa created. Of course, he went down with the knee injury. Fred Warner went down with a season-ending injury as well. Mykel Williams, the 49ers' first round pick, a player I'm very, very high on his bright future. He's out for the season with the injury as well. So it's just the 49ers have been dealt so many blows, and the fact that they are still in contention for the number one seed is pretty remarkable. It's a testament again to Kyle Shanahan and obviously the talent the 49ers still have on the field. They have made some changes in terms of their own personnel, in terms of bringing some players in. I was a fan of their addition Keon White from the New England Patriots, for example. But at the same time, it's the same superstars that are powering the 49ers. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, and it remains to be seen if George Kittle is going to be able to get back onto the field, if Trent Williams is going to be able to get back onto the field for San Francisco. And so that's why this is a team that definitely has had some transition. But at the same time, the reason why they are in this position is because of the same superstars that they brought in the field in week one.
Yeah, and the return of Brock Purdy, he is playing lights out other than that pick six on the opening drive the other night. After that point, the Bears had absolutely no answer for him. His pocket movement and ability to extend plays and making throws from different arm angles, he's doing it all right now, back at full health after missing a bunch of games. And credit to Mac Jones, because Mac Jones really kept this team afloat for all those games that he was playing at the quarterback position in Shanahan's offense, and kind of reignited his career a little bit. He might be a QB that some other teams look at this offseason and try to potentially bring in, because he's still a pretty young player. But there's been a lot of things that have happened to this team. You mentioned the injuries to Bosa and Fred Warner. Both of them were in the lineup and starred in that week one win over the Seahawks. The Seahawks didn't have Nick Emanwari for most of that game with a high ankle sprain that he suffered in the opening drive. There were a few other guys that got banged up in that game. So Seattle might be the team, is welcoming back guys, or have already welcomed players back from that injury or from that game. The 49ers on the opposite end of the spectrum, like you said, George Kittle, like everything that I've read is that he's expected to play, but who knows how effective he's going to be coming off the injury that he's dealing with. Trent Williams has been banged up. Christian McCaffrey's just been gutting games out, trying to get through them, and they get the short rest. But this team just keeps finding ways to get it done. They keep finding ways to score points and generate just enough turnover on defense, enough havoc on defense that they have been able to still win most of their football games. And I think, you look at a couple guys that have really been catalysts for this team. Bryce Huff, this is not a team that has rushed the passer well this year with Bosa being out and losing Michael Williams. Huff is the one guy that can, I don't want to say take over a game, but he's a guy that can certainly do a lot of damage, and he can get on hot streaks. So he's the one guy you got to worry about off the edge. Keon White's ability to move up and down the line gives this team some ability. And there are two rookies in the middle. Alfred Collins and CJ West are both guys that have improved a lot as the season has gone on. And they were making their NFL debuts the first game these teams played. And Demarcus Robinson was suspended the first game. Coming over to the Rams, he's familiar with these rivalries. He had a couple huge catches against the Bears on Sunday night, and he's really found his stride. That's helped make up for the fact that Brandon Ayuk has been out all season and is out taking videos, driving 90 mile an hour in front of Levis Stadium and all the other stuff that he's doing away from the team, not playing football. All these different distractions, and they have found ways to get it done. But at the end of the day, both these teams, Seattle doesn't have near as much personnel change from that first matchup, but the Seahawks are definitely a different team than the one that we saw in that season opener when they were breaking in a bunch of new coaches. They had a new starting quarterback and a bunch of other things they were trying to break in early in the season. They've obviously found their stride. Both these teams have won 6 straight games coming into this contest. It is truly a something's got to give moment with so much at stake. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how the Seahawks match up personnel-wise in this game when Kyle Shanahan's still doing a lot of what he's done in the past, but at least on defense, Robert Saleh's had to adjust a lot with the injuries they've had, and they've still found ways to be good enough to win most of these games. And I'm curious to see how Mike McDonald handles Shanahan's offense and what Clint Kubiak's going to be doing in this rematch when Robert Saleh's doing things a little different than he did because of the injuries. And that just creates so much more intrigue to an already very intriguing rematch here in Week 18.
Yeah, no question about it. I think just from the most elemental, standpoint, it's just that the Kyle Shanahan, of course, is known so much for his offense, Mike McDonald for his defense. I'm just fascinated to see how that plays out. Anybody who watched the 49ers thrilling victory over the Chicago Bears this last weekend, then they saw the creative way in which Shanahan is using Kyle Juszczyk, often described strictly as a fullback. I mean, he's playing some of that H-back role on the wing, and the different wrinkles that they were able to create, especially in their running game against the Chicago Bears, makes the 49ers look as formidable as any offense that you've seen all year long. But of course, that's exactly what Mike McDonald and the Seahawks have been able to do, is basically shut down these opposing offenses time in and time out when they are one-dimensional. And that's the thing, is the 49ers are fairly one-dimensional. They, with Brandon Ayuk, having more fun off the field than he is having fun on the field. Then you've seen the development of a Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings. That the 49ers have some talent at wide receiver, but whether it be George Kittle, Jake Tongas, we have not seen quite the consistency in the passing game, which is what makes Brock Purdy that much more fascinating, with his ability to escape the pocket and still kind of create without having to throw deep over the top. In that type of scenario, I really think that Seattle should have the advantage. But one of the things I wanted to kind of mention here, as far as just the development, you mentioned Robert Saleh, defensive coordinator, of course, former Seahawks coach as well. I am really intrigued by the development that we have seen at the inside linebacker position for the 49ers. Obviously, Fred Warner went down. D. Winters became one of the leaders of that team. And now you are seeing this other young man, Tatum Bethune, who has really become an explosive downhill thumper. And so he is somebody that's going to kind of bring back some of the violence that we have seen from the San Francisco inside linebackers of the prior years, but it also sets Seattle up to be able to use some of their running backs, some of their tight ends to great effectiveness as well.
When we come back, we're going to take a step back and I guess a step forward at the same time. We're going to have some Tell the Truth Tuesday words of wisdom. It may be talking about Carolina, the win on Sunday, and it might be fast forwarding and looking towards this weekend or maybe even beyond in the playoffs. We always have a lot of fun dishing out our takes. Tell the Truth Tuesday coming up next here on Locked On Seahawks. The NFL season is close to wrapping up, and the playoffs are coming up. There's nothing like being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting with logins, dealing with price changes right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pull up the Game Time app to check out upcoming NFL games, such as the Seahawks and 49ers, and you can still find great ticket options almost instantly. The app is incredibly intuitive. Browsing, comparing, and buying tickets took just minutes. I really like that the fees are included up front, so the price you see is exactly what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. You already live your team every single day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club to get Locked On Seahawks with no interruptions, members-only Discord, access, and more, all for just $5 a month. Or $50 a year. Go to lockedonseahawks.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, as we do each and every Tuesday, Rob, it's time for Tell the Truth Tuesday, where we dish out some words of wisdom, and we leave this kind of open-ended. It could be something coming out of the previous game, the win in Carolina. It could be looking towards Saturday night's NFC West title game at Levis Stadium, or even the playoffs. And, playoffs, it's a fun time of year to get talking about that stuff. So I'm going to hand you the mic first. What's the first thing you want to get off your chest today in terms of Tell the Truth Tuesday wisdom?
Well, I referenced the victory that the 49ers had against the Chicago Bears this last week. And Trent Williams, they're all Galaxy left tackle, as close to a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame while he plays as it probably has ever been in the NFL. But when he went down with injury on that pick six that Brock Purdy threw, he tried to get back to to help play defense. He pulled his hamstring, was immediately sidelined. The 49ers brought in their backup left tackle, Austin Pleasant, who is he's a quality player in the NFL, but at the same time, there was a steep drop-off in just the caliber of play at the left tackle position for the 49ers. And I was reminded of how well that Josh Jones has stepped up, by the way, for Charles Cross at the left tackle position. Sorry, I had a brain fart there and couldn't remember Seattle's Pro Bowl caliber young left tackle. And it's kind of appropriate because I wonder if John Schneider also could maybe forget about how well the Charles Cross has played over all this time because of how well that Jones has played in his stead. Jones is an interesting guy. I mean, he's 6'6", 330 pounds. He has struggled with knee bend in the past, but I've been really impressed by his knee bend. It's allowed him to anchor very effectively in pass protection each of the past 2 weeks with Charles Cross out against a star in Jared Verse against the Rams 2 weeks ago. And of course, against a good player in Nick Scorton, a rookie, but one who has shown flashes of being a big time player in this league. I was really impressed with the way that Josh Jones has also played in the running game. He got out. There was two big explosive runs for the Seahawks in this game. One, Zach Charbonnet off the left side, Zach Charbonnet off to the right side. In both cases, Josh Jones was out there leading the way. He knocked down two Carolina defenders on the first play and knocked down another one 10 yards down the field on the second play as well. It's his mobility, his ability to play in the wide zone offense, as well as the pass protection skills that he has provided the Seahawks that, to me, kind of personifies the greater depth that the Seahawks have over the 49ers and, frankly, every other team in the NFL. I think that Josh Jones, certainly John Benton as offensive line coach, Clint Kubiak, and certainly John Schneider as well, all deserve an awful lot of credit for the fact that Seattle's offense has not taken a significant step back, even with their best offensive lineman, Charles Cross, sidelined.
And talking about the run blocking, that really is a perfect segue into what I want to lean into to start off this segment. And that is that bully ball has returned to Seattle. It might not necessarily be what we saw when Marshawn Lynch was toting the rock, but the way the Seahawks are playing at the line of scrimmage these past couple games, there were a number of short yardage runs in this game. And look, Carolina's interior defensive line has talent. We talked about it going into this game with Derek Brown and Ashawn Robinson, and they got a couple other good backups there. That is a strength for that football team. But Jalen Sundell, I talked about him yesterday, going back and watching all 22 again, he and Gray Zabel and Anthony Bradford, they all had quality blocks in short yardage situations, particularly in the goal line situations when Zach Charbonnet scored his touchdowns, where they were getting pushed at the line of scrimmage, whether it was on combo blocks or single blocks, they were getting pushed, which is something we were not seeing earlier. And they're playing nasty on those perimeter runs as well. The bully ball aspect has returned, and defensively, it hasn't gone anywhere. That's been all season, the bully ball mentality for the Seahawks. But now the offense is catching up, and that is helping with, the Sam Darnold turnover issues, the offensive passing game not being quite as potent the last 5 or 6 weeks, at least consistently. The running game is picking up some of that slack, which you have to have that to win in the postseason, especially if they end up having to play on the road. So I think that is incredibly encouraging, not that just the fact they're running the ball well, but how they're doing it, the physicality, the bullying mentality has returned. Let's shift focus to the defensive side of the football now. And I know that, you were gushing about getting to talk about Josh Jones, but there's a guy that maybe didn't have the stats on Sunday, but just continues to impress you heading towards free agency.
Well, it's hard to have any stats when you play the cornerback position and the quarterback just refuses to throw the ball anywhere near you. And that has been the case with Tariq Woolen. Look, over the last 4 games, Corbin, it's not just against the Carolina Panthers, because I think that you have to kind of acknowledge that their star receiver, Tetairoa McMillan, had flu-like symptoms entering that game. I think that did have an impact in how Carolina performed. But that's why I want to use this sample set of 4 games. During that time, Tariq Woolen has allowed a total of 4 catches for 7 yards, the 1 touchdown to Puka Nacua, a 1-yard touchdown pass to Nacua. He allowed a 1-yard touchdown pass the last time they played against the Los Angeles Rams and Devontae Adams. And besides, those 2 touchdowns are the only ones other than one gave up to Jake Tongas in the very first game of the year, of course, the one that so many Seahawks fans started to use Rick Woolen as basically like a scapegoat for some of Seattle's other issues. The 73 yards that he surrendered to Tongas as well as Ricky Pearsall in that game against the 49ers, that was the most yardage that he gave up all season long. Otherwise, he's only given up 34 yards, is the most yards that he's given up in any single game this season, at least according to PFF Corbin. And again, he's only given up 3 touchdowns all year long. Rick Woolen is playing at a Pro Bowl caliber level, and no one seems to be talking about it. And it's one of the things that I think, like the running game, as you just pointed out, is one of the things that makes Seattle that much more formidable as we get into the postseason, because you're going to be going up against elite quarterbacks who often have elite wide receivers as well. The ability to put a corner on that might be able to just blanket them and shut down half of the field, that is kind of an ace in the hole that few people are talking about when it comes to the Seahawks.
And I'm going to pivot from a guy that isn't getting talked about very much, that probably should be, as you're mentioning with Rick Woolen too, a player who we have gushed about for weeks, but I want to take a different stance with it. And that's Nick Eamon-Warry. And we can talk about the athletic traits until I'm blue in the face, and I'll gladly do it. I will do it every single episode. And I've been doing it since January when I was watching his college tape and just like, who is this guy? He is an absolute freak. We know that he's going to get his hands on the football. He has more pass breakups than any safety in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. So he's making all these plays. But I think at this point, what is impressing me the most, and I'm not necessarily surprised by this. I know a lot of people in the draft process did not agree with me on this. I saw a player who did the dirty work on the South Carolina tape. But what he's doing week in, week out for this defense, there was one play in particular, and I could talk about a couple others from this football game on Sunday, but there was one play in particular where he had a tight end and a tackle coming at him, and he just shucked both of them off. And it forced the ball carrier to bounce it out, and there was another teammate sitting right there ready to chew up the play. He wouldn't have had a tackle there, though, if Nick Eamon-Warry would not have come in there and done the dirty work against those 2 blockers and shrugged them off. Like, this guy loves to take on blocks, and he's really effective at it. It isn't like he's just taking up space. Like, he can discard guys. Maybe he isn't running over them the way Cam Chancellor used to run over tackles, but he has his own unique way where he uses his long arms, and he plays with really good leverage for a taller guy. And I just love watching how he carries himself with that, because I think that's the difference between great players and elite players. The elite players get the job done in every facet. They don't just make splashy plays. They do the dirty work to help their teammates, to make some of their own plays. We've seen Eamon-Warry rip off of blocks like that and then make the tackle. We've seen him tackle Deebo Samuel with one arm while being blocked. I mean, he has made a lot of phenomenal plays while doing the dirty work, but also creating those chances for his teammates. That is, to me, what is setting him apart from all the other rookies. And I'm sure I'll have a little more time to talk about that here later, but that is what really is standing out to me now, is just how he has approached this with a blue-collar mentality.
No question about it. I mean, when you mentioned before about bully balls returning to Seattle, honestly, I thought that's where you were going. Even though we had said that you were going to talk about offense, to me, the most violent player, pound for pound, on this team might just be Nick Eamon-Warry. And I love the play that you referred to. There's just been so many of those types of plays all season long. Ones that the telecasters are quick enough to point out, and some that I only see on the all 22 way away from the football. I mean, he plays with a physicality and aggression. We used to, back in the old days when guys got a running start on kick returns and things like that. You call some of those guys wedge busters with the way that they would basically just, run through a brick wall essentially to get to the football and potentially sacrifice themselves if need be. Nick Eamon-Warry does that really well. And that's one of the reasons why I think that, again, his addition back to Seattle's lineup against the 49ers for round 2 of this heavyweight battle, I think may tilt the field a little bit more in Seattle's future. But we'll talk about that in a moment. I want to go back just for a moment real quick about the physicality and the running game. We talked about from the defensive side of the ball, as well as the offensive line. I really thought that Seattle's wide receivers, once it became obvious that Cody White, who unfortunately, if you haven't heard the news, Cody White was placed on season-ending IR today, unfortunately, by the Seahawks. So his season is over for Seattle. But when he was injured, and Rashid Shaheed also was injured, and Seattle had to kind of pivot and go to guys like Derek Young, Jake Bobo, and obviously Cooper Kupp, it did allow Seattle to run the ball more effectively because those are three of the best blocking wide receivers in all of the NFL. And they basically were ragdolling Carolina's corners, which is one of the strengths of their team, but it also helped Zach Charbonnet run wild in that football game.
Yeah, and then for my last takeaway here, I'm piggybacking a little bit off a conversation that we had yesterday, and I brought it up in the post-game show as well. The game planning at the beginning on Sunday, and this has been an issue in a few other recent games, where I just feel like the script has not been – early on this year, it felt like Clint Kubiak was really attacking teams' weaknesses, and it's almost felt like, and the more I watch the tape, it does seem like it's kind of been – we know we're going to win this game. We're going to hold some things back. We're not going to have all of our cards showing. Look, one of my favorite movies is The Waterboy, and I love it when Dan Fouts just constantly over and over again during the Bourbon Bowl says, last game of the season, can't hold anything back now. I know this is not the last game of the season, but dang it, you are now at the point you don't hold things back. Like this game is that big. And you are now at the point of postseason coming up where, look, everybody knows what you're good at. Everybody's got the things to game plan. You have to bring your A game. You've got to have your whole playbook ready so that you can attack really good football teams and try to find their deficiencies. So I'm saying this right now for Clint Kubiak. The time to hold back is no longer now. You need to treat this like it's the Bourbon Bowl moving forward and listen to Dan Fouts for a couple times. Anyway, when we come back, we are going to pivot to end of the season awards because guess what? We have 1 week left and there are several Seahawks players, coaches, maybe even a certain executive that are in the running or should be in the running for big awards coming up after the season ends, and those will be awarded before the Super Bowl. So maybe you can have your cake and eat it too. We'll get to that coming up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to Locked On Seahawks Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are closing in on a massive season finale for the Seahawks going up against the 49ers. We've got our key matchups coming tomorrow, game planning, and all that fun stuff coming up in upcoming episodes. But since we are now in the final week of the regular season and the Seahawks, we know, are in the playoffs and they get a chance to get the number one seed, this team has a chance to do something that it has not done in a long time, Rob, and that is win some major awards at the end of the season. We thought Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, when they were finalists for Rookie of the Year, that maybe one of those guys could win it. There had been some talk a few years ago about Geno Smith maybe being an MVP candidate and then tapered off at the end of the season. We haven't seen any of these major awards. Comeback Player of the Year for Geno Smith, but we haven't seen any of these major awards really swing to the Seahawks. And yet I feel like there's at least three of them that we have to have a conversation about that I would make an argument that a Seahawk should be a favorite. And I think we got to start with the Offensive Player of the Year. Right now, if you look at FanDuel, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the favorite to win Offensive Player of the Year. Puka Nacua behind him. You can make compelling arguments for both these players, Rob, but I feel like JSN, unless Puka Nacua goes out in Week 18 and just has a 300-yard performance and JSN falls flat against San Francisco, to me, this award has been won for JSN with just how dominant he's been, an offense that has not thrown the ball near as much as what the Rams have this year. You're muted, Rob.
I think you make a really sorry about that. I was coughing earlier. I think that you make a really logical argument, Corbin, as to why Jackson Smith-Njigba should be the offensive player of the year. I just don't think that it's actually going to happen. I think you can make the same argument about why Cal Raleigh should have been the MVP, in baseball, just because of the fact that he is a catcher and all the duties that he had to perform, as opposed to, say, Aaron Judge in the right field position. With Jackson Smith-Njigba playing in an offense that doesn't have a lot of other weapons, or at least didn't have perceived weapons initially, doesn't throw the football as much. I think that JSN's statistical dominance this season is all the more impressive. That said, I don't think that a lot of voters care. I think that the bigger market that is LA is going to tilt the field in Puka Nacua's favor. He has had repeatedly some unbelievable performances on primetime. So I think that if JSN is going to win this award, and I think that he should, I think you make a strong argument for him. I don't know that there's any player in all of the NFL that does not play the quarterback position on offense that is more important, perhaps Bijan Robinson. But that's, again, I think we're talking about an absolute superstar player, but I think that Puka Nacua is the one who is actually going to wind up winning that award, sadly, for Seahawks fans.
And I completely disagree with you, and I'm going to tell you why. Jackson Smith-Njigba has done something that Seattle players have a hard time doing. He has drawn national attention this year. He has been talked about a lot on those morning talk shows. He has been talked about a lot on the radio, and there have been people follow. I mean, he has still got an outside shot if he has a massive game to pass Calvin Johnson for the receiving yardage record. There is still an outside chance he does that. He's got more explosive plays, and I think that is something that is going to matter to voters here. How many times they've seen him going 40-plus yards on bombs, and he's had more of those than what Nacua's had. He's averaging almost 1.5 yards more per reception, and just stats is not going to win this award, as you mentioned, but I do think the fact that he has been in the national eye for much of this season as one of the reasons the Seahawks have come out of nowhere in many people's eyes to be potentially that number one seed. So I think he is the favorite here, and I will actually be surprised. Now, this could change if this week pivots to Puka Nacua, but I just think JSN has got this. Now, the one that I don't think is going to happen that I think should happen is the Defensive Rookie of the Year. And we talked a little bit already about Nick Emmanwori, but I'm just going to throw some numbers out here for you, Rob. I mentioned this earlier, 8 pass breakups. That's the most for any safety in the NFL, and he missed 3 games, and really mostly 4, most of the 4th game. Nick Emmanwori missed time with that high ankle sprain. He has more pass breakups than anybody. He's got 2.5 sacks. He's in the top 5 for pass rush production rating, according to Pro Football Focus. So when he's blitzed, he has been an absolute demon going against other teams. We've seen him stuff the run. He's got a bunch of tackles for loss. And oh, by the way, the dude plays like 6 positions. We've seen him play all over the field. To me, as a football purist, I don't care what uniform Nick Emmanwori's in. I watch the Seahawks defense, and I gravitate to number 3. I mean, Byron Murphy's kind of in the same vein up front, and DeMarcus Lawrence. But Nick Emmanwori, more games than anybody else, is just you just can't help but watch number 3. The way he plays the game. I don't know that he wins it, but one thing that may work for him is there's not a dynamic rookie pass rusher this year that's got 1 million sacks. So I'm wondering if that ends up working in his favor potentially, and also being on a number 1 seed, he's a guy that maybe is in the limelight enough to get that award.
Should be. I agree with you. I think that he has had more game-changing plays, impactful moments for a number 1 seed, at least contender, and quite possibly the number 1 seed for the NFC, that he should get that award. I feel even more confident that he would win it than I do JSN for Offensive Player of the Year. JSN, for all of his dominant statistics early on, and we kind of talked about how he was on pace potentially for a 2,000-yard receiving season. He's got 1 100-yard game in his last 5. For the last 5 games for the Seahawks here. And so that's what I mean. It's he had incredible momentum, and whether it be his fault or anybody else's, I think that momentum has slowed for Jackson Smith-Njigba on the offensive side of the ball. However, I think that it's only sped up here for Nick Emmanwori. Now, I do think that both of them, if they are going to win these respective awards, they have to ball out on primetime Saturday night against the San Francisco 49ers. I think that both of them are going to be in an excellent position to do so. You know the 49ers are going to be targeting Christian McCaffrey, obviously, as well as whoever is at the tight end position. Both the 49ers touchdowns in the Week 1 victory over Seattle were 2 tight ends, of course. I think Nicky Manwari's role in that could put him in position to make some splashy plays. I think that Carson Schwarzenegger, the middle linebacker for the Cleveland Browns, as bad as the Browns are, that statistics do matter to a lot of these voters because they don't watch enough football. They just look at websites. And so that's the thing, is that I think that Carson Schwarzenegger is probably going to be the guy who wins. I do agree with your point that because there's not a dynamic edge rusher this year, that it should get a little bit more attention to the guys that don't get sacks, instead make more game-changing plays like producing turnovers the way that Nicky Manwari has done, playing special teams and the versatility that he's had. At the same time, I have been doing this too long to think that anybody is paying enough attention to the Seahawks until they actually are walking around with the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah, and as far as the non-player awards go, I know our listeners are going to want us to make compelling arguments for Mike Macdonald, and I think there are. I think there are great arguments for Mike Macdonald to be Coach of the Year. The fact that he's got 15 road wins in his first 2 seasons, he has not lost any 10 a.m. Pacific time games in his 2 years. And he's got this team playing for the number 1 seed when they had a new quarterback and they were breaking in some new players on defense. And there were very low expectations, at least outside of Seattle for most pundits, for this team. That being said, you've got some other teams that were much worse last year that are going to the playoffs. Jacksonville comes to mind as one team, and that is typically the coach that gets Coach of the Year. So I don't see that happening. However, John Schneider, if John Schneider does not win Executive of the Year, now something has gone horribly wrong. That, to me, is the slam dunk, not even JSN. This is the slam dunk for me because you just look at the free agency, getting Sam Darnold and DeMarcus Lawrence, among others. Draft, Gray Zabel, Nick Emanwari, Torrey Horton before his injury, Robbie Oots, all the impact players, the guys that have contributed from that class. And oh, by the way, they had some undrafted guys that they brought in that have been able to contribute a little bit for them. And then you consider the last couple of years, the players they brought in and just how that team has been elevated, the trade for Rashid Shaheed. I can go on. He has been on a heater. John Schneider, if he's not Executive of the Year, again, something has gone horribly wrong. And I actually have a very good feeling that he's going to get it this year.
He certainly should. I mean, that to me would be like highway robbery. That would anger me more just from a evaluation standpoint, not playing the fanboy role in any way. I anticipated that Cal Raleigh was not going to get MVP in baseball just because of the reasons we talked about before, just the media bias. I still disagree with it, but I understood it. If John Schneider does not get Executive of the Year this year in the NFL, I just simply don't understand it. Look, I have a great deal of respect for the jobs that a lot of other general managers around the league have had, including here in the NFC West. I think that Les Snead and John Lynch deserve an awful lot of credit for the Rams and 49ers quick turnovers that they have had at key positions for their clubs. But at the same time, I just think that, as you said, Corbin, Schneider has been on a heater here for a year. And perhaps one of the reasons that I think that some will argue against him is just because he's been on a heater for multiple years now, and there's not going to be that immediate transition. I mean, this was a double-digit win team a year ago. So some would argue, well, hell, maybe they only win 4 more games. How do you compare that to, what's going on in New England or in Jacksonville, for that matter, for Chicago? At the same time, I just think that what John Schneider was able to do at all of these key positions, and not just the additions, but the subtractions, the way that Geno Smith and DK Metcalf have essentially fallen off cliffs in their new landing spots, despite all of the talk that that they were going to make Seattle look foolish for giving them up. I just 100% agree with you. John Schneider should be the NFL Executive of the Year. And if he is not, then something is wrong with the voting process.
And if anybody that votes for this is listening, there may be a few voters that are listening. I will tell you, going from 10 wins to 14 is a heck of a lot harder to do in the NFL than going from 3 wins to 10. I know that it's more wins, but going from 10 to 14, that is incredibly difficult to do in this league. That's why you don't see teams consistently winning 13 plus games. It is hard to win games in the NFL. So that would be my argument. And that would also be something you can say for Mike Macdonald too. as coach. But I think especially for a GM like Schneider, who has never gotten this award when there were several times that he probably should have, this is absolutely his magnum opus. So he deserves this Executive of the Year award more than anybody in Seattle's organization deserves an award at this point. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it's Matchup Wednesday. We'll dive into all the key matchups to watch. Seahawks 49ers, colossal Week 18 rematch coming up at Levis Stadium. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.